Good evening to those watching. My name is Ryan Hickman, and I will be moderating the Justice Matters Criminal Justice and Democracy Candidates Forum this evening. Before I describe tonight's format, I want us to welcome the sheriff candidates. So I see my screen goes from top to bottom with the candidates, and there we have Captain Doug Woods, Deputy Sheriff Dale Flory, and Lieutenant Jay Armbrister. So welcome, gentlemen. And they are the candidates running on the Democratic Party ticket to be the next Douglas County Sheriff. There are no Republican candidates that have filed to run. So over the next 90 minutes or so, I will be facilitating a discussion structured around 4 topics: the expansion of the Douglas County Jail, leadership in the area of criminal justice reform, racial disparities in our criminal justice system, and public accountability and citizen engagement. It has been the position of Justice Matters that the sheriff is more than just a piece of the local criminal justice system. If elected, the decisions made by the sheriff, the leadership they provide, and the level of accountability and transparency will play a major role in determining who is in our criminal justice system, including who is in the jail, and how long they remain involved in the system. For each of our topics, I will ask a lead question and give you 2 minutes each to describe your position. I have also set aside time to ask clarifying questions about your particular positions. During this time, I may ask you to be more specific, ask a clarifying question to all of you, or provide the opportunity for other candidates to rebut your statements. I request that you speak with as much precision as possible so that the voters can understand the policy and leadership positions you will make if elected. And I will remind our audience rather, that our candidates, that Justice Matters is a nonprofit organization. So we cannot and will not endorse candidates, but we will endeavor to educate the voters with the utmost clarity on how you will act in the role that you seek. So before the end of our forum, I will provide you up to 90 seconds for your final thoughts. You may use this time as you wish, but I would encourage you to clarify your position related to some of tonight's topics. So we will not be beginning with just an opening statement. We're going to try to use our time and just dive right into the questions. So our first topic is on the expansion of the Douglas County Jail. And so I'll kind of read an intro and then ask our candidates about the particular question. So on the topic of jail expansion, communities all over America are finding success in implementing reforms and decreasing jail populations. Many of these reforms happen at the district attorney and court level, as you know. And while we understand that the sheriff's office is the gatekeeper to the jail and responsible for the health and welfare of the inmates, the sheriff also has a role of enforcing laws and arresting citizens. As sheriff, how will you use your position to work toward alternatives and reforms? Please be specific as to what alternatives and reforms you would work to accomplish. We'll begin with you, Lieutenant Armbrister, and then Deputy Flory, and then Captain Woods. So we'll have 2 minutes each for this one. How will you use your position to work toward alternatives and reforms? And please be as specific as you can. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm understanding the question to be because since the sheriff's office is split into basically two entities, basically within one agency. We have the corrections division, we have the operations division. The operations is the enforcement arm with the investigations and road patrol and that kind of stuff. So what I'm hearing is that you're asking how I would shape that specific portion of our agency. And what I would say is that when it comes to arrests and and incarceration, I would say first of all, the sheriff's office makes up a pretty small percentage of the overall arrest numbers. But even within that, I think we even make up a more unique arrest dynamic as far as the types of crimes and situations that we find ourselves in, being out in the county, being out in the unincorporated areas of Douglas County. We're not in more of the urban type call load, as well as maybe the styles and the types of calls that these urban areas would receive. So what I would say is that a lot of times when it comes to arrests made by the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, many times it's mostly for traffic situations. And I'm all about, if somebody can have what we call a notice to appear, but it's also basically like a citation or a notice to appear in court instead of having to go to jail and get bonded out. I'm all about, writing people's tickets, giving them the court dates, telling them to come to court, as opposed to taking them to jail. I know that that's not always the case, and there are some times where people feel like jail is the right route to take. That's unfortunately, as the sheriff, I can only guide that. I can't say one way or the other on certain situations. But I would certainly lean more towards writing more tickets, releasing more people to safer areas as opposed to taking them to jail, especially in the current situation we're in with the pandemic. However, there are certain statutes within the state where we are bound by law. You shall make an arrest. If the domestic battery is one of those, where if we have probable cause to believe that physical contact has occurred, rude, insulting, or angry manner, we are bound by the law.
Thank you. Deputy Flory?
In regards to jail expansion, while I understand the county commission will determine whether or not a jail expansion passed, I applaud the county commission for revisiting the expansion topic and reopening the discussion. I am opposed to expanding the jail at this time. I don't feel jail expansion benefits our community. Something that hasn't been firmly addressed is the fact that a nearly $30 million expansion would require roughly 60 new officers to staff it. Frankly, current staffing at the jail is a challenge even before adding 60 additional officers. Do we really want to expand a jail only to have it sit idly by with no staff to support it? That's why I believe funding social services such as affordable housing, education, food subsidies, healthcare, and job training, that should be our priority. Mass incarceration is not the answer, in my opinion. I think our focus should be shifted to fully exploring alternatives to incarceration. We need leadership that is committed to addressing the bigger problem with criminal justice reform. I truly believe we are moving in the right direction with the construction of the mental health campus and the implementation of pretrial release, mental health court, drug court, and enhanced or expanded probation. We need to give those programs a chance to work and continue to develop sustainable long-term solutions utilizing all available community partners and social services.
Thank you. Captain Woods?
Well, in regards to what we would do differently on patrol, as Jay talked about, we have two different divisions within the sheriff's office. The patrol division or the operations division, and then we have the corrections division. And I agree with quite a bit of what Jay says. There's a lot of things that we are statutorily bound to make arrests on. Is it domestic battery, domestic criminal damage, those types of things. You can also encourage your officers to use officer discretion. Not everybody needs a speeding ticket or something like that. I mean, some of the warrants that we get that we have to serve are minor failure to appear, failure to pay their traffic tickets and stuff like that. But not saying you can't delegate to these officers not to write tickets and not to do these things. I mean, they have to do a job, and education and enforcement kind of go hand in hand. But what the bigger issues I see is dealing with people in the county with some mental health issues that sometimes comes into play. We're covering 470 some square miles, and on a good night there's 5-6 guys or 5-6 people working. And I've heard some ideas about working with social workers and people who are a little bit more better trained in mental health issues I think that's a great idea, and that's something worth exploring to help with the issues we sometimes encounter. But sometimes it's not necessarily realistic, or is it attainable to, you could be down at the Osage County line on 56 Highway and dealing with a situation. We may not be able to get someone, a psychologist, psychiatrist, or a social worker type person down to that location in a timely manner, because you have to drive to Lawrence, pick them up, and bring them back. But I think these are some ideas that are worth exploring to see what else we can do in our community to help this. But there are certain things that our hands are tied on as far as reducing the number of people going to jail, and we can't vary from that, because that's what we're statutorily bound to do.
And that's time.
Very good. So I'm going to ask the question in a slightly different way. As you're all familiar, obviously, with Mike Brower. You guys work with him as the head of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. He has suggested that each agency using the jail needs to decrease their usage by 25%. In your role as sheriff, what ideas do you have that would allow the sheriff's office to be able to meet that goal? And do you believe that that is an attainable goal? So we'll spend 1 minute each on this, and we'll start with you, Deputy Flory, move to Captain Woods, and then Lieutenant Armbruster.
I do believe that it is attainable. It's a rather large number, but when I was serving warrants in the warrants division, I would generally get a hold of people by phone to begin with, and give them an opportunity to take care of their warrants that way. So that way they're not having to come up with money where they're going to be sitting in jail if I were to go out and arrest them at their place of employment or home or whatever. That seemed to work relatively pretty great, I guess, is the word. I've got a lot of positive feedback from that. Basically, like they said, we can issue NTAs and stuff like that. I mean, we do have some discretion. The biggest thing is like domestic battery, DUI, stuff like that. It's going to take, you have to arrest at that time. I mean, it's a shall arrest. But there are ways, and it's not just law enforcement. It's the court system. It's probation. It's everybody that's involved that needs to be together working in a collaborative effort to reduce this. It's not just law enforcement.
And that's time.
Good. Captain Woods?
So again, I think it goes back to the things that we're required to make arrest on and not make arrest on, or the discretionary arrest. And we have to basically look at the kinds of calls that we're going to, what kind of reports the officers are taking, and what kind of arrests we're making. Is that an obtainable number of 25%? I don't know, because I have not looked at those types of numbers of what we're actually arresting people for, when we're arresting people, and what is the alternative to making that arrest. And I think that's something we can look at, definitely. Can we reduce it by 25%? We'd all like to say we could, but until we know what those numbers are, we can't tell deputies, no, you're not allowed to arrest for this, you're not allowed to arrest for that. I think it goes back to, some things can be officer discretion. Yes, you can issue a ticket for a criminal trespass or something like that. But the other things we're required to make arrest on, sometimes our hands are tied on what we can and cannot make an arrest on.
And that's time.
Lieutenant?
You ready? Are you ready, Ryan?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So again, I think let's say the Douglas County Sheriff's Office is responsible for cutting 20% of our arrests. And I would say let's just use a number of 100. There's 100 arrests in a month. I would say personally that the Douglas County Sheriff's Office is responsible for maybe 10 of those arrests. We are not a huge enforcement agency when it comes to making daily arrests, because we don't have that many contacts with people. We don't have the call load that some of these other agencies have. So that means we would be responsible for cutting 2 arrests a month. And outside of DWI and domestic battery and or just very, very serious charges, The other arrests that typically are made are made on warrants. And so whether it be a failure to appear in court or a probation violation or just some sort of a probable cause where they file charges and they want this person to appear in court. So if we could cut out some of those, I would love to do that. And what I would like to have is I would like to have the ability for our officers, if you find somebody who has a warrant, whether it be failed to appear or whatever, have the ability during the daytime or certain hours to take that person straight to that court or to a court and bring them in front of the judge and say, here they are. Okay.
That's time.
And don't
Go ahead and finish your thought.
Okay. Well, just I don't want to make it sound like it's night court, but you could bring them straight to the judge. Let the judge decide if they need to go to jail or if they can set bond and set a new date. Thank you for letting me finish.
Yeah, very good. So given that the sheriff has a seat on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee and has great influence regarding the county jail discussion, what is your personal view regarding the necessity of the jail expansion as proposed by the current county commission on January 29th? So we'll give you a minute each to respond to that, and we'll begin with you, Captain Woods.
Well, I'm going to play the cards that the county commissioners deal me and what the public and the legislature deals me. So if they decide to build the jail or not build the jail, that's really not up to me at this point. What I am required to do by law, and we all know that, by state statute, I'm required to, the sheriff is required to have the jail. He's required to keep the inmates safe and secure. He's required to meet the basic health care and mental health care needs of those inmates. So regardless of what happens or what their opinion is, we're still going to keep doing our job to the best of our ability. Right now, due to the COVID issue, yes, our numbers are way down. And I hope it stays that way, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can guess and we can estimate and things like that, but we really don't know. If our population happens to spike again, we'll start housing inmates at other locations again to meet those needs that are required by law for us to meet. I can't tell you, if it's going to spike, and I hope it doesn't. I think manageable numbers and those types of things, I think is a good thing. But again, I don't have any choice in what happens. The sheriff is responsible for the people coming into the jail and taking care of those needs, and that's really where I stand on the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. Lieutenant Armbruster.
Thank you. So obviously this is kind of the crux of what we're here to talk about tonight is the jail expansion. So we're prepared for this. I work in the jail every day. I've been in there for years. And I saw the way that the overcrowding was creating these unfair situations. It's always been safe. It's always been humane every time I've been there. But I feel like we do have a duty to create a peaceful environment as well as a fair environment. So I saw what the information I was provided to the commissioners in which when they made their decision, I understood the reason that it was asked, and I understood the reason that they approved the expansion. I also see the reason that it's being revisited due to this COVID issue. And I had no idea that we could just jettison this many people out of our jail. Because again, that is not my lane. That's not what we do. We don't decide who comes to us and how long they stay. But so I do hope that we can stay, because if we can maintain this level, you got it. Let's do it. I want to see our jail number go to 0. I challenge everybody watching this to help me figure out how to send it to 0. But we all know that's not going to happen. So if it spikes, okay. If it spikes, we're going to have to figure something out. But I don't know that the expansion is going to happen. So I'm okay with that.
Okay. Deputy Flory.
Well, I kind of stated my opinion on that to begin with. I'm opposed to the jail expansion at this time. In reading the report that Justice Matters sanctioned by, I think it was Dr. Danielle Rude, I believe is her name. There are many alternatives to jail expansion, and I firmly believe in that. I think we need to take care of the public prior to expanding the jail. That's where the social services come in. Like I mentioned before, affordable housing, education, food subsidies, healthcare, and job training. I mean, I don't think mass incarceration is the answer.
Okay, and just a clarifying question for the three of you, and this can I mean, easy for me to say, but you could answer it yes or no. And that is, would you ask the county commission, based upon the facts that you currently have, to rescind its resolution to expand the jail? And we'll start with you, Deputy Fleury, because I think we know.
Yes, I don't believe the expansion for the jail is needed.
Captain Woods?
I would ask the county commissioners to think about what they're doing and to do what's best for the Douglas County Jail and the citizens of Douglas County.
And Lieutenant Armbruster?
I would say that if we can maintain our status quo and the current populations, then I would say that we need to revisit it and we can reallocate spaces currently in our facility without an expansion.
Okay, we're going to move on to the topic of democracy and how that is affected within the sheriff's office. So we live in a world, I think, as you all know, that seems increasingly hostile to alternative views and opposing opinions. We also live in a very diverse social and political county. As a leader, you will have the opportunity to bring people together or to create division. How will you work toward bringing law enforcement and our community together? So we'll start with you, Captain Woods. We'll give 2 minutes for this, and Captain Woods, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think we continue doing what I've been doing through my campaign. You're reaching out across the community, all the different diverse backgrounds, different groups of people in Lawrence, Kansas, and talking with them. What are their concerns? What are their problems? What are the questions that they have for local law enforcement? And looking at what those issues are. Can we, as law enforcement officers, what can we do to do our part to make this better? Some issues we can help with. We need to improve our relationship with the people in our community. We need to earn the public, or start working to earn the trust of the public back. That's going to be a tough road ahead of us, but we've got to start reaching out and communicating with more people. Issues like citizens review boards, those types of things, being involved in your community. Those are all things that I think are great, are really important. Sure the other candidates agree. Things like we do with our Citizens Academy, that helps people learn about what the Sheriff's Office is about. And we in turn learn about the people that are attending our Citizens Academy. So it's definitely a two-way street. Engaging with young people in the community, I think is vital. We have to have positive interaction with young people in our community, not just, being the nice guy, but we're looking to recruit people to come work at the Sheriff's Office. And I think all those things together, you have to do as a law enforcement executive, as a sheriff, is bring people together, have an open mind and listen to people and offer solutions back that can be helpful in the community.
Very good. Deputy Fleury.
So when I started my campaign, I listed 4 priorities. One was jail expansion, one was social justice, one was mental health, and the final was transparency. As far as the immediate need, I believe social justice is what needs to happen right now. I mean, I'm committed to interrupting the implicit bias and racism that's been going on across the country and around the nation. That's why I think the social justice committee that I want to start involves my selected undersheriff, Lieutenant Clark Riles. He's a person of color, and he views things from a different lens than me being a white male does. He's got different experiences, different things that he's had to address, and he's been racially profiled in the past, and he'll tell you. I think part of our big thing is we want to have those candid conversations with members of the public. We want to know and have those conversations that are hard to talk about and try to make things better. I mean, that includes speaking with Justice Matters, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, and other community members and organizations. I mean, we want to bring everybody together so we have a cross section of our society, I mean, Lawrence is a very diverse population, and we need to have those conversations to try to make it better here in Lawrence.
Lieutenant?
Thanks. So what we're hearing is just a lot of the same things that we've been hearing for weeks now. And I want to speak more to the point instead of just regurgitating what I've said already, in that we are in a position now where we have lost the public trust, and it's up to us to earn it back. We're not trying to change the perception of law enforcement. We're trying to change law enforcement in order to change the criminal justice system that is so deeply flawed that it's not going to, the change can happen here, but we're going to have to work to move the change down the road and up the chain. So when I talk about trying to bridge the gap with our community, there's two ways to go about it. One is you've got to get the people in your community to buy in. But the slow money investment is to get yourself and your people in the schools. So these little tiny kids, they have their first interaction with the police is not when the police show up at their house or standing at the window of mom's car. It's when they have a time to meet them as human beings, have positive interactions. And then also it's, we have got to do a better job of hiring a more diverse and representative cross-section of our humanity that lives in this county, because we have this beautiful diversity. That's what makes Lawrence so great. And my question is that, we say all these things, but what have you been doing up until now? What have you done to address these racial disparities? What have you done for these marginalized groups up until now? I stand strong in the fact that I've reached out to these people. I've immersed myself in these conversations. I've tried to learn what it is they want me to hear. But I'm not just going to sit here and kind of throw back these canned answers at you folks. I don't have the answer, and I know that you people do, and I'm here to listen to what it is you want me to hear.
Right. Our next question is a two-part question, and that is, what role do you believe that the sheriff has in going to Topeka to lobby the state for reforms that will make our community safer? In your opinion, what are some of the laws that need reformed that you plan to go to Topeka and use your voice to see changed? We'll start with you, Deputy Flory. We'll give 2 minutes apiece for this.
Yeah, I think that is a very vital role. One law that comes up quite often is the fact that if you threaten bodily harm to someone and they perceive it as a threat, that is criminal threat, which is a felony. If you were to walk up to them and punch them, that is battery, which is a misdemeanor. It's stuff like that I think we need to change. It's words as opposed to physically going up and hitting someone. And that's what I would advocate for.
Right, Lieutenant Armbruster.
Okay, easy. The first thing is, if I'm going to Topeka, I'm going to be standing on somebody's desk demanding that they allow us to get another district court judge. Our cases are so backlogged, and the wheels of justice have ground to a halt because we are so hamstringed by the caseload that these judges in this court system is working under. But when it comes to actual laws, it's the mandatory minimums that drive me nuts. You get caught for driving, on a suspended license, which is something that an unbelievable amount of people have to do in order to make it through their daily life. You'll go to court, and while I understand the premise behind it, I don't feel that does anybody any good to send them to jail. You're driving your car on a suspended license to get to your job, so then you go to jail, and all of a sudden you're going to have your license suspended for a whole lot longer, and you're going to lose your job. How is that helping anybody? So mandatory minimums, but I also feel like there's just I don't necessarily agree with the analogy of criminal threat and battery, because a street fight is different than someone threatening to blow up a church. So we can get off in the weeds pretty far if we're going to start parsing out the words of specific statutes. I think that they're written ambiguously enough that we can interpret them a certain way. But also that's up to the district attorney's office to decide what is charged. We are the fact finders. They're the truth finders. Thank you.
And Captain Woods?
So a couple of things that come to mind. Yeah, lobbying in Topeka, I think, is one of the very important duties that a sheriff will do. I think some of the crimes that we need to look at is, your felony DUIs. They're sentenced to the county jail for a felony DUI. You're looking at misdemeanor marijuana possession and possession. We're not the district attorney's not charging personal use or minor possession of marijuana, but it's a statewide problem. For certain drug possessions, it's a felony. Should we not be focusing more on getting people treatment and the help that they need if they have an addiction issue versus putting them in jail? I think those are important issues that we need to be working on with Topeka. Fraud is another case that has mandatory minimums. That's a nonviolent offense, but they're still required to go to prison. So we have to look at all those issues and then lobby our legislators to change those laws. And that's what we have to do as sheriffs and other people, is to where we need to go with this and how do we reduce these numbers. Simple marijuana. I'm sure at some point or another in the very near future, marijuana will be legalized in the state of Kansas. How much of a burden does that take off us as law enforcement? Great, there's a lot less work, but I say heroin addiction, methamphetamine addiction, those types of things, prescription drugs, those folks are in more need of treatment and help like that than they are needing to go to jail. That's where our legislators need to help step, they need to step in and help us with those issues.
Okay, and continuing in that line of question, some of the suggestions that I have seen from people in regard to areas to potentially lobby in Topeka are looking for, and you all will probably have more information on this than myself, but looking to establish a database to track disciplinary records of terminated officers, declassification or decertification of disciplinary records to make sure that there's public accountability, ability to purchase and use militarized equipment by local law enforcement agencies, or even standardized use of force policies for all law enforcement agencies. So we'll start with you, Deputy Flory, same order, but what are some of your thoughts on the ability to lobby on those particular issues in Topeka?
Again, as far as officer misconduct, I fully support the national crime, the database for the officer misconduct. I think officers should be held accountable when they wrong, because basically you're entrusted with taking someone's liberty away from them. So when you misfit that badge or the uniform and the oath, how good are you if you can't even do that? I mean, the public trust is what we count on, and we need to start repairing the public trust.
So, Lieutenant Armbruster.
Okay, just so we had, what was it, military equipment buyback?
I listed four things
quite a
rather
list there.
rapidly. Probably wasn't fair to Deputy Flory with them going first either. But I was talking about a database to track disciplinary records, the declassification of disciplinary records for accountability, militarized equipment would be the third one, and then the standardized use of force policies.
Okay, great. Yes, I agree. If your badge is tarnished, you shouldn't work anymore as a law enforcement officer, and everybody should have the ability to see what, every agency should be able to see who it is they're hiring if there is some sort of bad act or something in their history. I do support a database because I certainly, as sheriff, I don't want to hire somebody. I don't want to hire somebody else's problem, so to speak. Only to find out later that we've made a huge mistake and we could have been saved by this database. So as far as the accountability, I expect to be held accountable, but I also want to have those records available to me when it comes to hiring. The declassifying of the disciplinary records, I tend to say that it's if it's founded, and if it was found that you did, I believe that, yeah, it should be declassified. But if it's found that you did not do anything wrong, I feel like the information should be put out there, but I don't know that the officer should necessarily be identified. In this social media driven world, it's, things just tend to get blown out of proportion sometimes, and that's not the right term to use. But I just feel like we're in a unique day and age when it comes to doxing and people's information being so readily available. Standardized use of force. I'm sorry, was that time?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. We're good on use of force, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. You need to unmute yourself if you could, Captain Woods.
So I believe we're all three in agreement on this. Yes, we need to identify those officers, whether it's a biannual report that we can, put out as a sheriff's office, identifying complaints or issues of professional standards being violated, and tell the public what was going on. How many complaints did we have? How many complaints were founded? How many complaints were unfounded? And what was the disciplinary issue on those? If someone was terminated, yes, we're going to send that information to the state, the C-Post. They'd make the determination on whether or not someone's remain or keeps their commission. And when you commission, that means your authority to make an arrest. And also other agencies are looking at that, or should be looking at that, to make sure that they're not hiring someone who's been terminated or has resigned under investigation. So make sure that we are providing all that information to the state. Other states also check on that information. Somebody might get fired in Lawrence, they can't go to Missouri, or they couldn't go to Oklahoma or one of the surrounding states to get hired because of these records that we keep now. I think it also shows more transparency for us. A lot of the things, when we talk about the demilitarization of police officers, I'm very much for that.
That's time. I'll allow you a few more seconds to finish that thought, though.
There's just some things that I don't think in today's world that we need to be possessing. It's hard to say, but the readily available military surplus sometimes does not have its place in law enforcement. And I believe that a lot of times some agencies have maybe taken advantage of that, but we wouldn't be doing that here.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
And Deputy Flory, I'm going to go back to you for a few seconds because I know I read those 4 things off rather quickly. I want to give you an opportunity if you have an additional thought in regard to that.
Yeah, I do, and I appreciate that. As far as the complaints go, if they are substantiated, I believe, like I said, that it should be well known to the public. If they are not substantiated, I don't have any problem with keeping those in-house. I mean, I don't want to put a bad name out for someone that hasn't been, I guess, convicted of anything. So yeah, that would be my biggest thing.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And this is in a final question in our democracy section here. Previous leaders of the city, county, and police department have attended the Nehemiah Assembly that Justice Matters hosts each spring to hear the concerns and thoughts of hundreds of citizens. And as a group, we are wondering, will you commit to attending this assembly to be able to hear from the people of Justice Matters each spring? So I'll give you 1 minute. If it doesn't take that long to answer, that's fine as well. So we'll start with you, Lieutenant Armbruster.
This is an easy one. I've already been to it. And Brent Hoffman can verify. I tracked him down in the green room to say hello to him, to let him know that I was there. Nora Murphy was kind enough to invite me, and I came and sat and listened. So in fact, that was where I realized that I was going to be a big deal, because my name was printed in the little bulletin that they passed out to everybody with my email address, wanting people to reach out to me to talk to me about incarceration. So yeah, you'll see me there every year.
Captain Woods?
I would say not only will you see me, but you'll see other members of our command staff. And I think that's important. Definitely I would be there, and other members of the command staff would also be attending these yearly meetings. We need to listen to people. We need to have open dialogue, conversation, and be willing to listen and then offer solutions at the same time.
And Deputy Flory.
Yes, that being one of my priorities, I guarantee I will be there, and like Doug said, other members will be as well. This is something that we need to listen to. That's the only way we're going to fix the problem that law enforcement is dealing with in criminal reform.
Very good. Thank you. We've touched on this already, but we're gonna touch on it more as a topic here, and that is the issue of racial disparities that have occurred within our community. Recent reports and studies have indicated that African Americans make up close to 25% of our jail population, whereas they account for less than 5% of the overall population of Douglas County. Further, only 19% of diversions are granted to African Americans despite being arrested and jailed at a much higher rate. Do you agree that there are racial disparities within the system? And if so, what will you do to address the racial inequalities found in our local criminal justice system that you have the authority to change? We'll 2 minutes apiece here, and Deputy Flory, we will begin with you.
Always beginning with me. That's one of
written it out wrong, but you get the call.
Okay. Again, that is one of my priorities. We need, as far as racial disparities, we need a collaborative approach to making change. I mean, that comes from law enforcement, district attorney's office, defense attorneys, judges, court services, JCC, all working together to affect change. We need to partner with area agencies and social services that are willing to help. I mean, these are things that need to happen, and they need to happen quickly, because we all know the world we're living in right now, and it's not a very pleasant one.
All right, Captain Woods.
I think most of the members are aware that, currently the sheriff's office and the police department are taking part in the law enforcement contact study, and the numbers are not where they, the sample numbers are not up there yet. And I know they planned on doing it for about a year. And I think as the sheriff, once that data comes in, that's what we have to start looking at, because that's one of the things we can directly deal with as far as our deputies. If there is a problem, we address those problems. But as far as the other issues that go on, diversions, the sheriff, as we all know, the sheriff has no control over who gets a diversion. We don't even have a say in that. That's a district attorney issue. That's a court issue. So all the things that are out of our hands, we can make suggestions, of course, but, would we like to see more people get diversions? Heck yeah. But yes, I do. I think that's where we have to start at. Does racism, systemic racism and that kind of thing exist? Yes, very much so. I'd be remiss in saying that it doesn't exist. We all need to work on it. It's a community effort, and a lot of the finger pointing goes at us as law enforcement, and I understand that, and we need to do our part to improve that.
Lieutenant Armbruster.
So I think when we start looking at the numbers and the 25% jail population, 5% population, I do not want to sound like an apologist here, but I do feel incumbent on the fact that we need to point out that all of the people who are in our jail are not all from Douglas County. We have many members from surrounding counties, other states. So but I also am well aware of the fact that the CJCC report that came out a couple weeks ago clearly said that Black inmates spend, was it, like 4.5 days longer on average than white inmates. Clearly systemic issues that have got to be addressed. You know, and you look back a year ago at the amount of diversions that were eligible as opposed to the amount of diversions that the district attorney's office extended the offer to, that percentage was very low. And I know that the race disparity in that was not good. Only in the last year has that number of people that are now being allowed to go on diversion, even though they've always been eligible, they've only just now been allowed to enter the diversion or the pretrial release, sorry, not diversion program. It's actually getting up to where it should be. So I'm not trying to apologize or explain away bad behaviors. But what I will tell you is that as the jail administrator and in charge of the jail, if we see racial disparities, it will be our job to point those out to the areas in which the core problem lies and see if we can't go to, you know, whatever entity it is and say, why is it that you are doing blank? And why is it that you are bringing us blank? You know, and here's what the numbers show. Why is this happening? And hold their feet to the fire, hold them accountable for what's going on. And if it's us as an agency from our enforcement area, from our enforcement part of our division, you can bet we're going to take care of that. So as being the person in charge of the jail, we see what goes on. We understand, you know, we have a finger on the pulse of what is happening. And it's going to be up to us, just like good cops calling out bad cops. It's going to be on us if we see something that is not right, is to figure out what it is and let them know they need to change it, or we're going to fix it for them.
Okay. So each of you have served in the law enforcement community and in the sheriff's office for an extended period of time. I believe it's 20 plus years, if I remember right, for each of you. What do you think makes you different compared to your opponents when it comes to leading improvements on systemic racism? Captain Woods, we'll start with you and we'll go a minute each. Captain Woods, then Lieutenant Armbrister, and then Deputy Flory, you'll be third this time.
Well, I think that my 33 years, that's a long time. And over my 33 years, I have had a lot of different contacts with a lot of people across our community. I've gotten to know some really amazing people, and I've gotten to hear their stories about some of the issues that are occurring. Can I fix all those issues? No. Some of them, you know, happened a long time ago or whatever. But I think it's one of those things you have to look at is how you interact with the community. I mean, it's refreshing to run into somebody at, you know, the grocery store and say, hey, you know, 15 years ago you arrested me and you didn't, you know, you treated me with respect and dignity. That's the kind of things that I like to be able to see when I'm walking through the grocery store, you're going through Walmart or something like that. People calling you or stopping by the building. Hey, you know, I ran into you 25 years ago. And, you know, I was not the best person in the world. I wasn't the nicest person in the world, but you still treated me with respect and dignity. So I think those are the things you have to continue doing as a sheriff or as a law enforcement officer to gain that, the community trust back, and just keep working at it every single day. We can't give up on a today because it's not a good day. We have to keep working on it every single day, making sure we're doing the right things for the right reasons.
All right, Lieutenant Armbrister.
Well, I think, you know, you talk about our career being 20 plus years, but I'll step outside of my career and just say that I've always been, well, outspoken, but I've never been afraid to address people who have, you know, a view that is just simply not acceptable. You know, I address, when I see a Confederate flag, I handle that. I educate and I demand that they listen to what is supposed to be happening and how they are wrong. I have no problem. I've reached out. I've been in parts of LGBTQ communities. I went to a class here recently on how to better interact with trans youth so as to support them and help them. And, you know, my diversity and my breadth within my career is unmatched. You know, you know, we've been told that there's 5 divisions in this. Well, it's weird because I've worked in 6 of them. So I'm unmatched as far as it goes with what I've done in my career. But when it comes to outside of this, I'm socially diverse. I have a daughter who identifies as LGBTQ, and I love it that she is so strong and proud and she's able to communicate that to us without any fear. So, I just don't know what else to say other than the fact that the reason this job is so hard for me is because I care so much. I'm an empath, and I want everybody to succeed. And if I have some resource to help them succeed, I'm going to give it to them. So I've kind of wandered off topic there, but I get very passionate when we talk about this kind of stuff, and racial disparity just pisses me off.
Yeah, and Deputy Flory, I'll remind you the question is more, what makes you different compared to your opponents when it comes to leading improvements on systemic racism?
Well, I'm committed to interrupting the implicit bias and racism. I think having my undersheriff, Lieutenant Clark Riles, serving as undersheriff, I mean, he obviously views things differently than I do. He's got a different lens than I have. He's got different experiences than I have. This is where I want to focus my candidacy. We need to interrupt the implicit bias and racism across the board. And like I said earlier, that's not just with law enforcement. That goes into the court system. That goes into probation, parole. I mean, all of these entities working together, that's where we need to focus our energy right now. We need to come up with ways to fix this, and it's going to take a group effort, and that's why I'm a big proponent of the team approach. It's not just me. It's going to take everybody involved here to fix this and criminal justice reform.
So the next question is lends towards a little bit more specificity within this same particular area, and that is, what are the ways that you propose training officers to deal with racial tensions within the community and even within the department? So we'll start with 1 minute on that. What are the ways that you propose training officers to deal with racial tensions within the community and the department? So Lieutenant Armbruster, we'll start with you.
Well, we've talked at length already about our diversity training. I personally think it's a joke. We're required to have, 4 hours a year, and people say, well, let's do 8. I recently learned about a sheriff. I want to say it was in Texas, like DePue County. I can't remember what it was, but he actually went into his jail, found inmates that were serving time who came from all these diverse backgrounds, sat down with them, talked to them, interviewed them, figured out where they came from, what brought them there, what did they have, what did they not have coming up. And then he's utilized them as a resource to show their own officers what is so different and why it is that we carry our implicit biases in, but how do we use that to break that down? And when you have when you work in the correctional setting, you can't help but form a somewhat of a relationship with the people that you work in those housing units with every day. And then to hear their story and to hear things that you just would have never thought of, or maybe as a young cisgendered white male, I would have never encountered, because I'm the most I'm the least oppressed person in the world as a middle-aged white male. So to hear their stories is really, really valuable. Plus, I also feel like eye-to-eye contact, hearing stories, true stories from somebody's own actual life is super impactful. And I think we've got a lot of resources right out there to use. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Deputy Flory.
Yeah, as far as training, we're required to have 40 hours of yearly training. That's a minimum. My thought is we definitely need more training, and that's why I've looked at Beyond Diversity. That's a 2-day course that I know LMH Health and the Lawrence School District have actually put people through, and I think we need to do something like that in terms of social justice. It's an in-depth course. Also, I think we need de-escalation training, where we use our words to de-escalate situations. And then that kind of goes along with the use of force training as well. In addition to that, CIT, Crisis Intervention Team, training for the mental health, behavioral health issues that people are facing. And then, of course, racial and other bias-based policing. In addition to that, As these two gentlemen have mentioned in the past, scenario-based training are all things that we can improve upon.
All right, Captain Woods.
Well, I think when you look at racially biased policing training, you have to look at all the different groups of people in Lawrence, Kansas. You can't just focus on one. And there are numerous groups across Lawrence, Kansas that need to have a voice in our training or need to have a part in our training. And yeah, we're only required, to have a minimum number of hours a year for racial diversity or racial bias policing. So increasing that, I think, is paramount. But you're not just focusing, and I assume the other ones are agreeing, you're not focusing on one group. We have lots of different marginalized groups in Lawrence, Kansas that we need to hear from, and we need to train our people on how to interact and everything else that goes along with that with these different groups, because there are different cultures and different ideals that go along with the different groups in our community, and we have to understand that. And I think that's part of the problem, is we don't sometimes understand what's going on. I do agree with some of the other stuff. One of my things I'm going to push for is what's called stress inoculation training.
And that's time.
And that's where you are.
We'll give you a few seconds to finish it.
It'll take more than a couple of seconds to talk about it. So
Okay.
I'll
We may get there on a future question. So the next question is this. So before moving to our final topic, I just want to ask a clarifying question on this topic. It's a yes/no question, but still want to give each of you a minute to explain your answer. So if the system that we have now has structural racism, do you believe that building a bigger jail exacerbates the opportunity for greater injustice? And Deputy Flory, we will begin with you.
I'm opposed to jail expansion to begin with, so I think you could probably put two and two together. That I think the potential is there for that. So, yes.
Okay, Captain Woods.
Well, I think, again, that's a two-part thing. What are we able to control with our jail as a sheriff? Controlling who comes to our jail, we don't get to control that. We don't get to control how long people are in our jail. Those are all beyond the control of the sheriff. Bonds, those are not at the control of the jail. Who gets a diversion? All those other issues are not at the control of the sheriff. Again, I'll repeat it. The sheriff is required to make sure that their basic needs are met in the jail. Healthcare and mental health are two of the things we have to be able to provide for them. And then we can provide other services to help those folks when they're getting ready to be released from jail. But, that's my stance on it.
Okay. Lieutenant?
Oh, I think what I'm hearing between the lines here is that if we have a bigger building, would we put more black bodies in it? I think that's kind of the question that's being asked here. And whether I have any say over who comes into the jail, I understand that the optics of that is that would be the case, because history would the best prediction of the future behavior is past behavior. So it would look very much like that's all we're trying to do. Says the sheriff, of course, we do not want anything of the sort. And again, like I said, I want zero population in jail. Let's shut that thing down and make a museum out of it. But I understand the perception, and it would be up to us to work to show that that's not the case. But it falls back to fundamental fairness within the system on the street, where the cops and sheriff's deputies are meeting the people and the enforcement action is taken. And then what happens to them inside the criminal justice system and the court system is what's going to drive that.
Very good. Next question I have, we have a little bit more time, so I'm going to fit in an additional question here. Many in our community are concerned both about policies and the training that officers receive in de-escalating potentially dangerous situations, as well as the resources that our officers have for maintaining their own very real mental health challenges. So please speak to how you will help address each of these areas. One, the training. for de-escalating potentially dangerous situations, and 2, helping our officers maintain their mental health in a very difficult occupation. And we will begin with Captain Woods, and I'll give you a minute each to kind of share your thoughts on this.
Okay, well, yes, de-escalation training is extremely important. It's something that all the deputies and all the corrections officers will need to go through. We've started working on that through Force Science. Another one of the trainings that goes along with that is the CIT, or crisis intervention training, because it's just as valuable and just as important. So we have to make sure that all of our people are trained on that and they're utilizing that training to the best of their ability. Tell me, now Drew, like, what's the second part of your question there?
Helping resource
I'm sorry, yes,
officers.
I apologize.
Yeah.
So, and making sure that our officers' mental health needs are met too. I mean, currently we have chaplains that are available to talk to our deputies. We have employee services. We have peer support. You know, all those things that are available to our officers, we have to make sure that they are mentally sound to be out there doing their job. And if they're not, we need to make sure that we're working with them to get them the help that they need.
And that's time.
Lieutenant Armbruster.
I'm sorry, did you say I had 1 or 2 minutes on this?
1 minute.
Okay, I'll talk fast.
Okay.
De-escalation training is now in our policy. We just had, all the patrol deputies just had a quarterly training here, and I'm sure Deputy Fleur recalls, and it included 8 hours of de-escalation training. We learn about it in our jail corrections officers academy. They learn de-escalation training. But I also go back to the inoculation training and the scenario-based training. The training I received as a little baby deputy was fear-based. We saw these horrific videos of these horrible things happening to deputies and officers, and we went out into the world thinking that everybody was out to kill us. And it's not the case. You have to prepare for the worst, but you cannot go out into this world, and especially into this job, thinking that everybody is a murderer waiting to meet you. So, and then you look at the scenario-based training. I go back to the Philando Castile killing all the time. There was 4 people involved in that. A little girl in the back seat, the lady driving, Philando, and that officer. Only one of them was scared, and he had a uniform and a gun. And that young lady that live streamed that, she was the one who didn't forget her training. She stayed calm and she answered his questions, and he lost it. Maybe that can be weeded out earlier in his career through scenario-based training. And then mental health. I know I don't have much time. PTSD survivor right here, based on cumulative stress disorder from this job because of the horrific traumas that we have seen, heard, and dealt with. And I am peer support in our agency now. I am in charge of peer support. So when somebody is not well, they come to me because I've walked the path and I've ended up back in the light. Thank you.
Deputy Flory.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, de-escalation training is key to having a healthy agency. As far as mental health goes, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office has been very fortunate to work with and collaborate with Bert Nash, DECA, and our own reentry team, developing programs that assisted individuals suffering from behavioral mental health conditions. Mental health court, drug court have all made a positive impact. One thing I think needs to be addressed when appropriate is looking for alternative avenues to take in order to divert individuals suffering from mental health away from incarceration. So yeah, as far as the co-responder team, the CIT training that we go through, I think everybody in the department needs to experience that. And we can all learn and be better and know how to adjust and handle people with mental illness by taking that training.
All right, thank you. All right, we're down to our final 30 minutes, gentlemen. So we're going to move on to the issue of ongoing accountability. So it's been reported that the Sheriff's Office is reported by the Journal World that the Sheriff's Office is behind on submitting annual reports for 2017, 18, and 19. The article did not state exactly what the Sheriff's Office should include in the reports or why those reports were not released. So in light of that, I have a few questions. Why haven't those reports been provided? Did you or your undersheriff have any role in not producing these in a timely manner? And what information would you provide to the public if you were in charge of those reports? So, little three-part question, but why haven't the reports been provided, if you know? Did you or your undersheriff have any role in not producing them in a timely manner? And then what information, if you were sheriff, would you provide to the public if you were in charge of those reports? So Captain Woods, we'll begin with you on this question. 2 minutes apiece.
So I can't tell you why those reports were never published or never finished. I asked the question myself, and and typically our reports revolve around the jail, the number of people booked in the jail, and the logistics, or the numbers around that. There are, however, other numbers that we collect within the sheriff's office, our calls for service, things like response time, those types of issues that we also keep from the downtown building. Being the one in charge of detectives, yes, I can tell you right now, or I can't tell you right now, but I can pull the numbers up of the number of cases the detectives worked, the number of cases they cleared. But it's, I don't know why they haven't. No, I didn't have any part in that. What information would I provide if I was the sheriff? I think that would be a community related question of what does the community want to know about what we're doing? I mean, you can give the basic information about, again, how many calls for service we had, as a patrol unit, what the booking numbers are, how many uses of force we had throughout our agency, what were the outcomes of those uses of force? Was there disciplinary action that was obtained or was doled out during that use of force issue? Those would be the types of things that you would publish in your report. But I also think you have to talk to the public about what information do you want to see us divulge so that you have a better understanding and more transparency for the sheriff's office. And it's just one of those hard things to say of what does the general public want to know. There's a heck of a lot of information out there. Just need to know what kind of information that the public wants to know about, and we can make that happen fairly easily.
Lieutenant Armbruster.
The easy answer is no. My undersheriff had nothing to do with withholding that information. But the answer as to why these reports didn't come out and the answer I'm going to give is based on what limited information I do have, because I'm not part of that's again not in my lane. But I do know that position that we hired, we had an analyst, a data analyst, who the job was specifically to handle tasks such as this, and that job got absorbed, and then all of a sudden that employee was no longer with the agency. I also understand the fact that as an agency, we probably let the community down by not picking it up, realizing that it hadn't been done. But in that time, in those years, there were 4 studies done from outside, entities that came in and studied our racial disparities and our bookings and all that. But I mean, when it comes to what information needs to be contained in these reports, I feel like I'll have to again agree with Doug here in that it's really what does the community want? What do they want to learn? What do they want to know about us? I mean, because we have an inmate in our jail currently who's costs $35,000 a month in medications. Our meal service, how much money we spend every year on meals. I mean, bookings and arrests and jail populations, those are the easy numbers. But when it comes to actually parsing it out and who's doing what, how much money is going where, that can be as big or as small of a report as you want. But I can tell you this, the accountability from our end, it needs to be that report needs to be available, and it needs to be what we can give the public that they want to see. Oh, unmute.
And Deputy Flory.
And like what Jay said, I think we were, from my understanding, and I wasn't part of that, from what I hear, is that we were in a transition phase, and that's why that report wasn't generated as it should have been. The second part of the question, no, myself or my undersheriff, if elected, had no bearing on that report or anything on that report. But I will say, with transparency being a key component of my campaign, that anything that the public wants to see that is allowable by law, I don't have any issues with sharing that with the public. I mean, there are certain, and there's certain elements that we can't share. I mean, if a case is in court. I mean, obviously we can't divulge like videos or anything like that, but anything that is allowable by law, I have no issue with the public seeing that. I mean, that's what's going to build the public trust to where we need it to be.
Good. Each of you have provided thoughts on developing a community review board for the Sheriff's Department. So why is it needed, and how do you suggest it operates to provide maximum accountability? And we'll go with 1 minute on this, and Lieutenant Armbrister will begin with you.
Okay, I've been running on the platform for, I've been filed for 2 years, and a citizen review board has been something I've been talking about since the beginning. We at the Sheriff's Office, we don't have a union, collective bargaining union, so we don't have to deal with that sort of negotiation as to what sort of things a citizen review board can and cannot do. So my suggestion is to have culturally competent people come in from the community who want to see what happens, wants to learn what happens, but they also want to be fair and open about how our practices are how we'll run and what we do. I want them to come in and have the ability to look at citizen complaints, good or bad, even if it's, I want them to see it all. I think that they should have the ability to look at use of force situations that maybe are what we would consider a low level, that would never have any sort of criminal outcome. But I also really want to see them have the ability, because I honestly feel like they would be a little bored. I want them to have the ability to look into our agency and see what it is we do and help us with best practices. And I've used the example that maybe something happens in one of the housing units and an officer handles this situation. It's some sort of not even necessarily use of force, but just some sort of situation. We can bring this video and this evidence and this information to them and say, here's what happened. Here's what our policy is. This is all well within policy. But is this something that you would expect to see, or is this something that is okay with you as a community member? And that way you can inform us, and if we need to change our practices or need to change our policy, or if they're satisfied with it, we can learn all kinds of different things. But I do feel like they would need to be culturally competent, and by that I mean they would need to understand what it is that we do on a daily basis.
Okay. Deputy Flory, and then we'll follow you with Captain Woods. We'll give each of you guys a minute and a half for your responses.
As far as the Citizen Review Board, I would absolutely be in favor of establishing a CRB. Again, with transparency being one of my top priorities, public insight and perspective is crucial to building the public trust. There would need to be a representation of board from a cross section of our community. Douglas County and Lawrence specifically is a very diverse community, and that would need to be represented on the board. I would ask that applications be made to serve on the board, and there would be some sort of vetting process to determine suitability of potential members.
All right, Captain Woods.
Like the other guys, I agree with we should have a citizens review board, and it should be a broad across our community. Those people who are picked, I think a vetting process is a really good idea. And I think once that group is set, then we have to train folks also. Train people on what our policies are, what police practices are, things that we do in our community, driving, our use of force, those types of issues I think are valuable, because you have to understand what's going on. So you have to train people to be on this board, and picking the right people to be on the board. And beyond that, then yes, you want to sit down with the folks, whether it's a complaint that comes from a citizen or it's one of the spot checks we do as ourselves, and that's something our supervisors do. They're watching videos of car stops and things like that. At the jail, I know they're watching interactions with the videos of inmates and stuff like that. They can spot things that are going on even if there's not a complaint being made. And then you can look at those from a different set of eyes and a different perspective. And I think that's valuable for a community.
Right. Very good. Thank you. So, as you know, over the holiday weekend, we shared with each of you and through email an offer that Douglas County received for free analysis and ongoing evaluation regarding the use of our jail from one of the nation's top experts in this area, the Vera Institute for Justice. And this offer would provide a pre and post-COVID analysis and ongoing evaluation about the use of the jail at no cost to Douglas County. The Douglas County Commission and the Criminal Justice Coordinating Commission have declined opportunities for this robust analysis in the past. The Sheriff's Office additionally has made acquiring some of that data difficult. If elected, will you work with the Vera Institute for Justice to provide the data necessary to conduct a comprehensive analysis of who is in our jail and why? So 1 minute for this, and Deputy Flory will begin with you.
I would like to research that more, I believe. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the information that would be needed is actually on our website. You can go to the booking recap, and there's information there for, and that's open to the public. You just have to register for it. You can go to the booking recap, and then you can also go to the people that are in custody. And I think everything that report is looking for, I believe, is in that. So I would like to continue the conversation as far as what that entails. I mean, I would have to get with our county attorney and find out the legalities of that, but I'm interested in keeping that conversation going.
And Captain Woods?
Yeah, I believe as a sheriff, we should be providing that information. If this analysis study can show us issues that are right or that are out there, then yeah, we can provide that information. And then, there is some information that is protected under CASEGIS laws and stuff like that. But the basic information that I think that this report is looking for, yeah, I think that there would be no issue as far as providing that information for somebody to dive into it and see what the outcome and what maybe a solution is with those numbers. But yeah, I'd be all for that.
And Lieutenant Armbruster.
Well, I'm going to maybe go a little different direction here. I'm not sure that the other two candidates understand the depth of which the information gathering and mining would be by Vera. I'm not opposed to it. I'll tell you that. That's what I'm saying right up front. But to call it free is a little bit misguided in the fact it's like a friend of you who lives in Greece saying, hey, you can come stay at my house for free. It's going to cost you a lot of money to get there and to stay there. We're going to have to dedicate an employee to sit there and mine the information that Vera needs. We're also going to be looking at criminal history records, which we have to, by statute, we have to protect. So that would mean that if we're going to turn it over to these the Vera Institute people, we're going to have to vet them through the same process that we go through in order to get the background so that we can give this information to them and let them use it. I am not opposed to it, but I just don't like the fact that we're calling it free. They're just not charging us, but it's going to cost the county some money. However, I am not, if it comes to a data analysis, a data analyst being specifically appropriated to this, and we would be responsible for their salary, then that's fine. But my question is, what information, how long will it take, and what programs can we look for?
Okay. And Deputy Flory and Captain Woods, I'll give you, if you guys want to, an opportunity to respond just in terms of, whether or not you have more knowledge about what would be required or thoughts on that.
Well, my question is, I'll kind of turn it back to you. Do you know what exactly they're looking for? What requirements?
Well, my thought would be that it is what Lieutenant Armbruster is referring to, that there is a lot more information that can be mined. And obviously a lot of that has to deal with working hand in hand with the district attorney's office and the court itself in regard to that, as well as other information that the sheriff's office might have in terms of what's happening in the jail, length of stay, different things like that, is less cumbersome. But all of those things have to be linked together in that, is my understanding.
Okay.
It's something that Vera has done with multiple communities across the country, and has a system both for integrating that information as well as being able to mine that data efficiently and quickly.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I wasn't exactly sure what precisely they wanted.
Yeah, that many of those things across departments in the criminal justice system. So we'll move to the next question. The sheriff's office
Hold on a
is.
second. Hey, Ryan,
Yeah.
Yeah,
do
go
I not
ahead.
get a chance to respond to that?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
So,
I
yeah.
thought you would jump in. So
No, I understand. I didn't want to be rude. But yeah, understanding what information is necessary for the report is vital. And understanding too that what information we collect on our end as a sheriff's office is totally different than what the district attorney's information will be and what information is collected by the district court office. Those are three different entities. Now, depending on exactly what Vera is looking for from the sheriff's office, again, there's information, just as Jay said, that we have to protect through KCG's law that we're not able to divulge. But basic information, depending on how deep that basic information goes, yes, I think we should be providing it. But there are, of course, realistic expectations of that, of how that information is extracted, who extracts it, and so on.
very good. Thank you. So the sheriff's office is funded through and by taxpayers and receives significant resources through taxes. But law enforcement agencies also derive revenue through behaviors such as ticketing citizens at speed traps and for minor mechanical violations. So what percentage of stops occur due to these behaviors? And what are the revenues that are typically generated through these types of stops? And I realize this is a more technical question, but Captain Woods, we'll begin with you, and 1 minute on this particular question.
When it comes to traffic stops and tickets and stuff like that, the sheriff's office gets zero revenue from that. That money goes to the state. The money goes to district attorney's diversion funds and stuff like that. The sheriff's office gains there's no financial gain to the sheriff's office by writing any kind of tickets or anything like that.
Okay, Lieutenant Armbruster.
What he said. No,
Deputy Flory, can we make this?
no, I'll expand a little bit. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So that money it goes to the state, and then it's funneled back. Now it does funnel back through the state into our coffers in certain areas, but a lot of that money goes out to the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. It goes into our district attorney's office, things like that. We don't get $5 out of every ticket. It's not one of those systems where if I write 100 tickets, my wife gets a new toaster. There's not any sort of situation like that where it's quid pro quo, where we write more tickets, we get more money. We have more people in our jail, we get more money. That's not exactly how this works on a day-to-day basis. Now I understand how the systems are overarching and money does funnel backwards, but it's not as simple as saying the more headlight tickets we write, the more money we put in our bank.
And Deputy Flory.
What they said. No, and in addition to that, I mean, we don't, like they said, we don't receive that. We don't have quotas. There's a misconception that we have quotas to go out and stop people, and we don't do that. I think we did years ago, and that's come and went. So that shouldn't be a concern of the citizens.
Very good. And was asking that question in part because I do think it's important for citizens to be educated regarding that in terms of what happens and how those resources are used. So we'll move into our closing statements here. And we're going to provide 90 seconds for each of the candidates to share their final thoughts. But before we do that, we want to thank each of you for being a part of this discussion tonight, as well as thank those that are watching tonight. So feel free to use your 90 seconds as you wish. If you want to clarify positions on tonight's topic or simply have a closing statement. We're going to start alphabetically, working backwards. So Captain Woods will be going first. While you're collecting your thoughts, I want to make a couple of quick announcements. I want to remind our audience and our candidates that Justice Matters is a nonprofit. We cannot and will not endorse candidates. We will endeavor to educate the voters. We will be uploading clips of this forum to our Facebook page in the coming days. We will also be hosting a county commissioners forum next Monday at the same time from 7 to 8:30, so please tune in for that. If you wish to be an active member or to receive emails from Justice Matters, we encourage you to email ajustlawrence@gmail.com. That's ajustlawrence altogether @gmail.com. So I want to thank you again for being a part, candidates, for being a part of this forum tonight. We really appreciate it. And Captain Woods, we'll start with you to share your final thoughts.
One of the things I wanted to clarify was the stress inoculation training that I didn't talk about. What that is, currently, and bounce off just a little bit what Jay said, we were, back in 1991, we were fear-based trained. So when I went to the academy in 1991, that's what we were taught. Everybody's out to get you. But what I think we need to start doing is looking at what stress does to officers in certain situations or deputies in certain situations. How do they react to that stress? When they're stressed, are they making bad decisions? And we've all been stressed in this line of work, but I would like to think we're making the right decision. But some people will get overstressed, make bad decisions, and do the wrong things. So if we can stress inoculate these folks or train them in a controlled environment to see what their reaction is to these different types of stress, how they're going to react, what they're going to do, and what actions they're going to take. If they're not fit to be a law enforcement officer, then we need to identify that at an early stage of our training. And if we have to, then that's one of those things where we can remove them from that position. But figuring out what those stressors are, because I think a lot of times in these situations we've seen around the nation, officers get stressed and they make bad choices, and they make bad decisions, and they do bad actions, and that's a result of not understanding what's going on in that officer's head, or putting them through the test to make sure they're going to do the right thing. And I think that's really important. One of the things we need to be doing, and we will be doing for the sheriff's office, is stress inoculation training. I'll just end there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for coming back to that as well, Captain Woods. Deputy Flory.
In closing, I want the community to know that my campaign for Sheriff of Douglas County is a team approach. We at the Douglas County Sheriff's Office have been blessed with quality individuals that are dedicated to serving our community. Our Douglas County community has a vested interest in how the Sheriff's Office operates. I will continually seek out community input and work closely with all community members and agencies in order to best serve the people of Douglas County. In recent years, studies have been completed by independent entities and recommendations were made on how to best address overcrowding in our jail. Quite frankly, we have dropped the ball in regard to this. We are now scrambling to find quick solutions because of our inaction at that time. We must fix this now. We need leadership that is forward-thinking and not just content with the status quo. If elected, and consistent with my team approach, Under Sheriff Clark Riles will be instrumental in the leadership of our agency. Clark and I firmly believe Douglas County needs a person of color in a top law enforcement leadership role. I can think of no better person than Clark to serve as my undersheriff. Please visit my website, floryforsheriff.com, to learn more about Clark and I and the vision we have for law enforcement in Douglas County. Thank you again to Justice Matters for hosting the event, and thank you to the community for engaging in the conversation. A vote for Dale Flory for sheriff is a vote for needed change in Douglas County. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Flory. Lieutenant Armbruster.
I really want to thank Ryan. I'm not going to lie. I was a little leery, worried about how this forum was going to go, because the way that the situation is going is it's become an adversarial situation between the sheriff's office and Justice Matters and a lot of the larger entities. And I just didn't know what to expect. And I can't thank you enough for the hospitality and the fair treatment. I find it very hard to understand. And I hate doing this because these two candidates that I'm running against, they're friends of mine. Let's face it, we've worked together for a long time. But anybody who has had anything to do with our jail over the last few years knows what the Vera Institute is doing and knows what they want to study. And I find it very disheartening that a candidate would say that they're against jail expansion, across the board, against it, without even understanding the basic knowledge of what it is that other people have been trying to do for years. And I feel like these programs, they're not new. The mental health campus, while fantastic, and I hope it gets bigger, it's only going to take 2 people a month from our jail population, 2 people a month. That's not significant enough to make a difference when it comes to a jail expansion. We need to think outside the box. We need to make sure that these programs that we have are running at full tilt, but we also have got to find new programs in addition to these ones that are already really working well, because the other entities have finally bought in. So I'm sorry. I get very passionate, and I don't want to make this a negative campaign. But I hope that everybody watching here is seeing kind of what's taking place. And but again, I can't thank you guys enough for letting me come on here and ramble for 90 seconds at a time. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan.
All right. Well, thank you. And that's another reminder to me as well. There was a district attorney forum going on the same time this evening. And that speaks to many of the things Lieutenant Armbruster was just suggesting, that there are a lot of areas within the criminal justice system that need work. And so if you want to tune in, go find on Facebook, you can find the video of that particular forum tonight as well. So we would encourage you to do that. So this concludes our forum, and I just want to say thank you again to our candidates, and good night to everybody watching, and God bless you. Thank you.